Carl Jung warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Today, money is the most common escape. We chase it, cling to it, build our lives around it, and yet so many still feel empty. So the real question is this: what part of you is money replacing? Carl Jung once warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And in our world today, money is the most common escape. We work endlessly, spend recklessly, build our lives around wealth, all while quietly wondering why we still feel so empty. Jung's insight cuts deeper than criticism of greed. He knew that when money becomes the stand-in for what we fear to face, it doesn't heal us, it hides us. The real wound remains untouched, and the more we chase wealth, the further we drift from meaning. Jung observed that many confuse money with meaning. He wrote, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There's no recipe for living that suits all cases." Money may bring freedom for some, but for others it only deepens the void. It is not a universal cure. It is not the soul's food. When wealth becomes the only goal, people find themselves spiritually bankrupt, surrounded by possessions, but starved for peace. This is the danger Jung called the shadow. We project our hidden needs onto money, hoping it will carry the weight of what only inner work can heal. And the more we chase it, the further we drift from who we truly are. Jung taught that the shadow is made of the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. For some, that shadow hides fear of failure. For others, it hides the hunger for love, or the terror of emptiness. When we bury these truths, the shadow doesn't vanish. It projects itself often onto money. We begin to believe wealth will buy respect, that money will finally silence the fear of being unworthy. But the shadow cannot be paid off. It must be faced, and until it is, every dollar becomes a substitute for the soul's deeper need. Jung warned that when we project our wounds onto money, we enter a cycle that has no end. The first promotion, the new car, the bigger house, each feels like a victory, but soon the feeling fades and the hunger returns. Why? Because the shadow cannot be satisfied with things. It craves acknowledgement, healing, integration. Money can purchase comfort, but it cannot purchase wholeness, and the more we chase it, the louder the emptiness becomes. Jung described this as a spiritual hunger disguised as material desire. The soul is asking for depth, but the ego keeps reaching for dollars. Jung often reminded us that fear is the shadow's most loyal servant. When money becomes the stand-in for security, fear of losing it begins to rule our lives. We check accounts obsessively. We replay financial worries in the middle of the night. We measure our worth against numbers on a screen. Jung taught that this kind of fear does not protect us, it imprisons us. The soul becomes smaller, squeezed into the shape of a bank balance. True security cannot be deposited or withdrawn. It comes from knowing ourselves, from building a foundation that money cannot touch. Jung warned that when the ego is hungry, it will cling to anything that offers status or validation. For many, money becomes that mask. We measure our worth by salaries, possessions, or titles, forgetting that these are costumes, not the self. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but we cannot become ourselves while acting out a role scripted by wealth." The tragedy is this: we trade authenticity for appearances, and in the process, we lose the very person money was meant to serve. The soul does not care for numbers. It only asks for truth. Jung believed that relationships are mirrors, reflecting the hidden parts of ourselves. But when money enters the mirror, the reflection becomes distorted. We begin to project value not on the soul of the other, but on their status, their income, their possessions. Love turns into transaction. Friendship bends under the weight of envy. Families fracture in the fight for inheritance. Jung warned that projection blinds us. We stop seeing the person, and instead see only what our shadow craves. True connection cannot be bought. It must be seen, felt, and lived. Jung taught that freedom is not the absence of limits, but the presence of meaning. Money promises freedom, the dream of choosing any path, buying any desire, but often it becomes another prison. We chain ourselves to jobs we hate. We trade our hours for digits in an account. We sacrifice health, time, and relationships, all in the name of security. True freedom, Jung would say, is when your choices align with your soul, when you are no longer owned by fear or enslaved by the hunger of the ego. Money can support that freedom, but it cannot create it. Jung believed that creativity is the language of the soul. It is how the unconscious speaks to us through dreams, art, play, imagination. But when life becomes only about money, creativity is the first casualty. We silence our art because it doesn't pay. We abandon play because it feels unproductive. Jung warned that this is dangerous. When the soul is silenced, its energy does not disappear. It turns against us as anxiety, frustration, or despair. To create is not a luxury. It is survival. It is the way the soul breathes. Jung taught that the greatest hunger of the human soul is not for wealth, but for meaning. Money can buy comfort, security, distraction, but it cannot answer the question, why am I here? Without meaning, wealth becomes a hollow shell. The mansion feels empty. The title feels fragile. The applause fades into silence. He wrote, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Meaning transforms money from master into servant. It gives wealth a purpose, a way to build, to heal, to serve. Without it, even riches collapse into despair. Jung never said money itself was evil. The danger begins only when it rules us. When money serves the ego, it feeds illusion. But when money serves the soul, it becomes a tool of transformation. We can use wealth to support creativity, to build communities, to heal, to educate, to protect what matters. The difference is not in the dollar, but in the direction. Does money point outward toward the world we want to create, or inward toward the ego we're desperate to protect? In Jung's language, this is individuation, aligning outer life with inner truth. Even money must take its place in that journey. Jung described individuation as the lifelong process of becoming whole, bringing the conscious and unconscious into harmony. Money, too, must find its place in that process. If ignored, it festers in the shadow. If worshipped, it devours the soul. But if integrated, money becomes one instrument in the orchestra of a balanced life. Individuation means seeing wealth clearly, not as salvation, not as shame, but as energy neutral until directed by purpose. When money is aligned with meaning, it no longer controls the self, it supports the self. It flows where the soul chooses to grow. Jung believed that transformation is not just an idea, it is action. The same is true with money. We must give it direction, or it will pull us into the unconscious currents of fear and desire. Ask yourself, does my spending reflect my values? Does my work nourish my soul, or only my wallet? Money aligned with meaning supports growth. It funds education, nurtures creativity, strengthens communities, protects the earth. This is not about guilt or denial. It is about awareness, because when wealth serves a purpose, it stops being a master and becomes a servant of the soul. Jung cautioned that what we avoid in the conscious mind takes root in the unconscious, and then it rules us from the shadows. Some believe the solution is to reject money, to call it corrupt, to live as if it does not matter. But denial does not bring freedom. It only breeds hidden fear, and that fear leaks out as anxiety, resentment, or secret envy. Jung would remind us integration is the key. Money must be acknowledged, understood, and given its rightful place. Not worshipped, not ignored, but seen clearly, so it serves rather than enslaves. Jung reminded us that the unconscious is not only personal, it is collective. Whole societies carry shadows. Money often becomes the stage where these shadows act out their dramas. Nations project greed onto enemies. Politics disguises fear as economic policy. Whole cultures worship wealth while quietly despising it. This collective shadow fuels inequality, inflames conflict, and blinds us to what truly matters. Jung believed that healing begins within the individual, but when enough individuals awaken, the collective begins to shift. By making peace with our own shadow around money, we contribute to healing the larger world. Jung often spoke of the inner compass, that quiet guidance that points us toward wholeness. When money becomes the map, we lose the compass. We follow external directions, status, approval, comparisons, instead of our own soul. But the compass is never gone. It waits for us in silence, pointing us back to meaning. To live with awareness is to ask, does this choice align with my inner compass, or am I trading direction for distraction? When money supports the compass, it strengthens the journey. When it replaces the compass, it weakens the soul. Jung believed that abundance is not measured in numbers, but in the vitality of the soul. Wealth is too small a word for the fullness of life. Real wealth is love that deepens with time, friendship that sustains you, work that ignites your purpose, moments of stillness that restore your spirit. Money can support these things, but it cannot create them. It is a tool, not the treasure. To redefine wealth is to step out of society's illusion and into your own truth. To ask not how much do I have, but how alive am I? This, Jung would say, is the true currency of a meaningful life. Carl Jung warned that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Money is part of that fate for many. It can enslave us in shadows of fear and hunger, or it can serve us if we give it meaning. The choice is not about rejecting wealth or chasing it blindly. It is about awareness. It is about integration. It is about asking, does this money serve my soul, or does it silence it? True wealth is not in numbers. It is in presence, purpose, connection, and wholeness. And every decision you make with money, every purchase, every trade, every path you choose, is either a step deeper into illusion or a step closer to yourself. That is the work, that is the invitation, and perhaps that is the freedom we seek.